All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. I am stoked because my brother was on the show today. Not my real brother, my brother from like another mother, but this man is an incredible entrepreneur. He's an incredible breathwork facilitator, coach, gene keys master, consciousness master. Like he's just a walking embodiment. He has an incredible app, an incredible business. He dances on both sides of mastery of self and entrepreneurship. And we tied it all together. And there was so much covered in this episode of how constriction happens before expansion. A quote that he said, before expansion comes constriction, before light comes darkness. How easy is right. How the deeper you breathe, the more you can receive. How business is not separate from us. It's a projection or a reflection of us. How we can either make decisions from our lower self or false self or our higher self, and how that supports us in achieving our goals in business. How our first mission as entrepreneurs, and he is a very successful entrepreneur, is to calibrate ourselves internally for the next level of success, prosperity, or abundance. How our consciousness is constantly projecting our external reality and how to shift it to create the results that we want. How our perspective is the difference between our prison and our power. We're here to master the inner game first and then earn the right to implement the strategies and tactics that create the results. He shares this incredible practice called the power of the pause. Asked him about his daily non-negotiables, how to integrate all this into our day-to-day, how to use this as an entrepreneur to be able to raise money or build your business or achieve more results. And he said, instead of answering the question, can I just show you? And he guided us through an incredible rhythmic breath practice and meditation in 5 minutes that is also included in this show. And so when you get to that part, just don't do it when you're driving, but I am lit up. I am bucket full because my heart just got filled. I got to do the practice with him and with you. And so I'm really excited about this episode. So let's dive in with my buddy, Chris. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And today I am stoked because apparently I have a lot of brothers, but this one fits the bill of my brother from another mother. He is just a way better looking, has long hair, and just, puts me to shame and belongs on a magazine cover for all the right reasons, which aren't physical. They're emotional, they're spiritual, they're in his structure, the way he operates as a man. But today we are joined by a man who I love and I genuinely respect to the ends of the earth, a man that I've had the pleasure of being connected with that always blows my mind and changes my perspective, whether it's breath work, consciousness, awarenesses, gene keys, you name it. Every single thing we talk about, I always leave feeling lit up and better, more in my heart, more grounded. And this man helps so many incredible people through his app, through his personal coaching, really reach the deepest levels of alignment in themselves and operate at the highest level to achieve their goals and their dreams, and has an incredible story himself. And so he's an incredible father, he's an incredible friend, he's an incredible entrepreneur. And so without further ado, I'd like to invite or welcome my friend Christopher to the show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. And thank you for that beautiful introduction. And yeah, I feel the same, man. You're an incredible individual and feel like a brother ever since we met. And I'm so happy to be jamming with you today.
Yeah, me too, man. And in typical George fashion, we typically have the best conversations before we hit record. So like literally a minute ago, I'm like, hey, Chris, we need to hit record or we're going to talk all day. Like we're just catching up and we're going to miss all of this magic. But one of the questions that I asked Chris, because Chris is super connected in this space. He has an incredible app called Beats and Breath, which I love and I use. And he's an incredible breathwork facilitator and like has this proprietary breath that I love. But in the same vein, he is so interconnected to so many entrepreneurs at different stages of business, from his investors to people in every industry that you can imagine, and helps people one-on-one with a whole lot of growth and expansion and building their life and business to achieve their goals. And I was asking him, I said, hey, do you see any common trends that are coming up right now? Like, is there this like resounding pain point that you're bumping up against? And he looked me dead in the eye and he's like, well, there's a ton, but I can define it really, really easily. It's the fact that there's always constriction before expansion and people are getting stuck in that process. And I was like, that's it. We're done. I'm going to hit record and I'm just going to let you take us to church. And so can you kind of give context to that, Chris, and expand and give some examples of like kind of what you're seeing and start breaking down what constriction before expansion means?
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's interesting. I was sharing with you offline that, I've been in the process of writing my book, and, there's a chapter in my book called Expand Your Consciousness. And the first line in that book opens up saying, before expansion comes constriction, before light comes darkness. And that's really where we find ourselves right now collectively, not just individually, but collectively. There is this push and pull, this tug of war that's happening. It's the controlling opposition forces that are trying to keep us down. We might call them the shadows, the darkness that's looming over this entire dream we're living in. And there's this part of us individually that wants to expand, that wants to awaken, that wants to reach greater heights within ourselves. And in order to do so, we must go through the muddy waters of our own unconscious in order to be able to expand to those new levels. Because you can't really just, there is a way of quantum leaping, of course, and we can get into that conversation. And there's some tools that we can work with to do so. But overall, we have to look at the underbelly and the underworld of our own unconscious and subconscious. And in there is really where the gems lie. But if we are in resistance, which often happens, right, is why you coach and I coach, we're coaching resistance. We're trying to help people close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And in order to do so, we have to work with that resistance, whether that's fear, whether that's doubt, whether that's lack of trust. It all is the same conversation. It all spins together in the same sort of narrative. But we have to allow ourselves to feel in first and foremost to that resistance. Where is that resistance coming from? Why is that resistance coming up? What can we do to actually, again, feel deeper into that? Because it's through the feeling state of actually going through it and not avoiding it that we allow the expansion to happen and we allow life to flow through us. But if we're in resistance, what happens? We're pushing up against life. And there's actually an ancient Chinese proverb that I love, and it's actually embedded within Gene Key 34, which is the shadow of force and the gift of strength, which we can share more about later. But the proverb is this. It says, easy is right. Easy is right. That in itself is an indication that when we are allowing life to flow through us, when we are surrendered to the process to the best of our ability, we allow that life force energy to not only flow through us, but to us, right? And another thing that I always love to say is the deeper you breathe, the more you can receive. And it's similar to that of being in an easeful, effortless, relaxed, calm, present, connected, centered state. And when you're in that state, you're void of resistance, and therefore you allow the expansion to naturally happen because you do not have to do anything to expand. You are already whole, complete, prosperous, abundant within yourself. You just have to allow the layers that of resistance to fall away, and all will be revealed.
Okay. Number one, there's already like 50 fortune cookies in here. I love it. Before expansion comes constriction, before light comes darkness, easy is right. So you and I coach this a lot, and it's something that we bump up against. But also for me personally, even right before the show, I was sharing like me being in a similar situation. But can you give a tangible example per se of like either with you or a client, obviously with anonymity, of like what that constriction might look like in the life of an entrepreneur, and then what that basically that trust or that faith looks like in the practice of like feeling into it, so that people can kind of tune into like what that would look like in their own
Yeah,
life?
absolutely. I'll use a personal I mean, I have many examples of clients, but I'll come back to a vulnerable state, right? And share a little bit about maybe a time and place where I was in that contraction or that constriction. And the first thing that comes to my mind immediately was 2 years ago. I've been through many dark nights, right? And we all have, right? We've all gone through them, and to varying degrees. Well, 2 years ago, close to my 35th birthday, I was going through a incredible metamorphosis and transformation. There was so many things calling me, but I felt so constricted and stuck within myself, within my business, within my relationships, within pretty much all aspects of my life. And that time was by far, probably, if I were to reflect back and contemplate my entire life up until this point, all 37 years, that was extremely difficult. I spent 3 weeks in probably one of the deepest depressions I've ever gone through. I didn't want to live anymore. I was in my bed. I couldn't even leave my bed. I could barely get up and see my son. It was like I was just shutting the blinds in my room, but also to life. I just didn't want to exist. And it was the most helpless, most powerless feeling, it just taken over me. And I would just grieve and cry and just go through just so many different spheres of emotion within my being. And at that time, I can remember just like, what the fuck is happening to me? What is going on? Why am I experiencing this right now? And almost like feeling almost like a victim to life, until I then began to use my own tools that I teach other people, right? And it's always that case where it's like, oh yeah, I have tools at my disposal. One of them is my breath. How can I allow myself to breathe through this experience and allow myself to know that everything in life is temporary? The happiness, the joy, the ecstatic bliss, the fear, the chaos, the destruction, all of that it's all temporary. And everything in life, the only constant that exists is change. So how can I ride the waves of this experience and allow myself to come out on the other side a new person, right? Because we're always going through this death and rebirth process. We have the birth in the beginning of our life and the death at the end of our life physically, but metaphorically, spiritually, we're going through death and rebirth all of the time. And so for me, this process was extremely instrumental to where I am today, to be able to expand, to attract an investor into my business, to reach X amount of downloads on my app, to work with more people, whatever it might be. All of that had to come going through that dark night, and which then catapulted me into a literal dark room retreat experience for 5 days, which I might share later. But that in itself and that process was instrumental, foundational, and crucial for my growth and expansion.
Yeah, I want to add some to this too, because I absolutely love that distinction, and I'll even give a tangible example of this. Like, number one, like one of the things that I coach on the most, but also one of the things that's happened the most, right? Like this false finish line trap. Like, you're talking about this death and rebirth, right? And in the same form, it's like what got us here won't get us there. And I can remember personally where I'm like, oh, I've made it in business, right? I have all my dream clients. They're paying me X amount of dollars a month. And they're like, dude, we're with you forever. Right. That's first red flag right there that I've now learned, right? Nobody's with us forever. But then the moment where I'm like, everything's in flow. And then I get an email that says like, hey, something happened. We can't pay you anymore. We're out. And I have hundreds of those moments in my life now, to then where that constriction was like, oh my God, my life is over. My life is ending. How am I going to do this? Where's the cash flow going to come from? But that constriction is what created the pain in the first place, because instead of taking a deeper aligned action, or breathing into it and seeing what I can learn in this or what I'm feeling, it becomes the distraction. That constriction leads to distraction, and that distraction stops me from taking a new action or aligned action that would eventually bring me a new client or somebody better. And the same thing, to where like I've had to literally use declarative language on myself and some NLP. And when it happens now, the first question I ask myself is, has this ever happened before? Right? Like, just to pattern interrupt that story, to be able to get into the weeds. But if we think about it in entrepreneurship, no matter where you are, it could be you were doing this launch and you launched this program and you're like, okay, you had this expectation that you were going to sell 100 and you sold 10. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, we failed. Not really, because we sold 10. Like, something worked. But if we think that we failed, we prevent ourselves from feeling in and leaning into the lessons of like, okay, well, what did work? What didn't work? And what are the 3 things I can commit to doing differently today, instead of prolonging that process, over and over and over again. And the reason I say this is because Christopher and I are like so aligned everywhere in life, like similar age, similar stories, similar situations, similar entrepreneurial path. And at some point we're going to work together and scale both sides of our lives together. But in that same vein, I've gone through these to the point where they used to smack me upside the head. And now it's almost like I know they're coming. So now I'm just prepared for when they come and almost being proactive in them to find the shadows or the leaks or where I've fallen victim into my unconscious mind of just checking boxes and hitting habits and behaviors instead of that constant expansion. And so I know personally a lot of people feel this in different lenses, right? I even feel it on social media where like I'll be like, dude, this is the best piece of content I've ever made in my life. And all of a sudden it's the one piece of content that nobody sees, nobody comments on, and nobody engages with. And I'm like, oh, and it's so easy to fall victim to like, I don't ever want to make content again. Instead of like, okay, got it. Let's rewrap the message. Let's try again. Let's swing again. And so that statement of like constriction before expansion is like the cheesy thing of like before an arrow is flung further, it has to get pulled really far back and then be released. And it's really staying consistent in those habits and behaviors. But you hit on something really deep that I think was probably one of the biggest traps I fell in early on, where I was not differentiating facts versus feelings because I was like, feelings don't belong in business, except those feelings were my intuition and almost like my roadmap to my breakthrough. And when you said, what did you say? You said the deeper you breathe, the more you can receive. And as somebody who does breath work now and facilitates it, even on my flight home from Croatia yesterday, I was like, I'm going to raw dog most of this flight, right? I don't want to do any work. I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and be still for 10, 11 hours. And I did part of it, but I'd start to sit there and breathe. And all of a sudden I had these emotions welling up and then the rumination was starting. And I was like, oh, I guess this was a good idea today. And I'm sitting here on this flight next to this dude from Sweden and I'm like crying 7 times and he's next to me as our meals are getting delivered. And this dude has to be like, what is happening to this guy next to me? And I'm just in breathing, feeling, releasing, breathing, feeling, releasing. And it was so crazy because I didn't even find clarity, but I released the emotion. And then when I landed at the airport, I knocked out more work in an hour that I didn't realize I was avoiding than I had in like the previous 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm.
And so can you break down from your vein, like what you mean by like the deeper you breathe, the more you receive? Because I would love your perspective on it.
Absolutely, brother. Well, thank you for sharing that. And that's a true testament to your internal work, right? Because when we talk about business, when we talk about anything in life, it's just a reflection of who we are. Business is not separate from us. And oftentimes we want to separate this. We want to call it an entity. And yes, it has its own sort of consciousness in a way, for sure. And we can work with that consciousness, but it's essentially tethered to who we are. So if we're not doing this internal work as you're speaking to, which I know you do so much of and so beautifully, that in itself will lend to greater expansion in that business or that relationship or whatever. It's all a reflection of you. And I want to make sure that that gets hammered in right from the start of this conversation. And when we talk about, or when I share, the deeper you breathe, the more you can receive, I'll break that down just a little bit. So for example, the more shallow, the shorter the breaths, oftentimes we're holding the breaths, we're constricting our energy. What's happening there? So let's just break that down one by one. We're in a place of fear. We're in a place of stress. We're in a place of anxiety. We're in a place of overwhelm. What's the result of that? Well, there can be many things. Life can be overwhelming. There could be so many things coming at you at once. Or we can dig even deeper and look into our unconscious patterns that stem from our wounding and trauma, which we don't, as a result, have a regulated nervous system. I see so many people all of the time. If I were to look at their breath pattern, it's from the chest, it's super shallow, and they're just essentially perpetuating the same exact cycle of trauma. It's a trauma response within one's being. They don't feel safe. And that would be a majority of the population. And so what happens when you're in that state? You're actually constricting your prana, your life force energy from flowing. You're not allowing it to circulate through you. And that is the very essence and foundation of creation, is that energy. And when you're not breathing into the navel, into the belly, you are really holding all of that in such a tight, intense state within yourself. Again, continuously perpetuating those same cycles and feelings and emotions. Alternatively, when you're breathing deep, when you're breathing rhythmically, when you're breathing slow and into the belly, you're allowing that life force energy to circulate. You're allowing all of that chi to move through you, and thus allowing yourself to relax, to be more connected, to be more present, to be more calm. And from that state, you actually feel more expansive. You feel more connected. And there is a greater level of clarity that comes online. So the first place I always start with anybody is their breathing. Where are you breathing from? Are you breathing from your chest? Are you breathing from your navel? Are you breathing shallow? Or are you breathing deep? And we begin to affect and work with the breath in this way. It allows whatever stored and stagnant energy we're carrying within, which is most of us because of our wounding or trauma patterns, that can then begin to release itself. And as that releases, there's a greater freedom that comes online, a greater liberation that comes online in all facets, not only internally, but that freedom's then reflected externally. Everybody's always chasing external freedom. I want to do what I want when I want. That's great. I love that. I want that too. But unless you are free within yourself, you are still living in a prison of all of your limiting beliefs, of all of your trauma, of all of the things that you're carrying within yourself. You are still in that self-imposed prison. So I don't care where you are, that freedom is first and foremost within.
Mm. And I don't know why, I just feel called to say this because like I talk about trauma a lot and I feel like it's a conversation, but I feel just called to like almost put a container around it. Like trauma could be any story that we're telling ourselves that isn't true. Any belief that we have of like, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or I failed at this. It could be, when we say limiting belief in trauma, it could be anything. It could be like the fact that you lost a business client that you loved and you were in with, and then it created like this residue inside of you that changes our perspective, right? Like, and I think the way that I like look at it is like anytime I'm in story, I'm choosing a truth, but it's not the absolute truth because there's so many multiple truths that can be true at the same time. And I feel like I always throw it out there as a term like big T trauma, little T trauma, but really it's any way that we're disconnected from the present moment or being authentically like who we are in that moment from an empowering place. Because I feel like sometimes people hear the word trauma and they're like, I don't have trauma, or I don't want to talk about trauma. Like, it's not that. It could be something happened in your childhood or something that happened in your life, but like I still have trauma from running a mastermind, and I loved my mastermind, but boy, did that install some trauma in me. Like, it changed some things in my body of like how I naturally showed up and how I wanted to do business, to where like sometimes now people are like, oh, we want you to do like group coaching. I'm like, oh, maybe I should feel into this. Like it could be a novelty of things. Like, just like, I was in Croatia, and they ordered this like beautiful lamb that was like slow cooked for like 4 hours. And I was like, I don't like lamb. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, actually, hold on. No, I've eaten lamb once before in my life, but I didn't like that lamb because it made me not feel good. And I had to like rework it in my brain to like try it. And then I ended up liking it. And I'm like, but even that, right? It's any story or any thought or belief that we have, and it doesn't matter where it was installed, that Christopher's talking about, that prevents us in that moment from being fully present or fully in our bodies or fully in our hearts. Because I'm going to lead this one a little bit, but I feel like this is something that you see. And as an entrepreneur, right, who has a very successful app and multiple successful businesses, and like you're interconnected in the world, the one thing that I've learned is that in business, especially entrepreneurship, it's not that new challenges appear. The same challenges appear with different amounts of pain associated, whether it's decimal points or people. But the only thing that truly shifts us to the next level is just our perspective of that same challenge. It's not that we learn a new tool or that we learn a new missing secret. It's that the situation that we're in, we find that peace under pressure, or we get ourselves to this place of centeredness or feeling to where we can rise above that circumstance or that evidence and then choose to see it differently so that we can take actions associated like what we've learned from previous constriction and then change our behavior in that same situation. And that's kind of how you unlock the next level of business. Is that how you see it as well?
100%. I think so many people, and first of all, just before I go into that, thank you for the distinguishing the trauma narrative and all of that, because it is a sort of word that's just thrown out there. But I agree. And we can also just make one other distinguishing factor here. And we can just even use the terms lower self or higher self or false self or true self. Am I'm in my false self or lower self, I'm in the story, I'm in the judgment, I'm in the attachment, I'm in the limiting belief, I'm in the XYZ. I'm in my higher self, I'm tapping into my inner wisdom. I'm clear, I know my purpose, I am fully connected to the divine and to all that is. So you can even also use that language there, which can also be, suitable for some people listening to this.
I love that. I like that one so much
Yeah.
more.
So there we go. We'll leave it there. Regarding what you were saying, I think a lot of people, including myself, early on was so caught up in those hooks, right? It's the bait that's out there. It's like, oh yeah, do this step, and this step, and you're going to be successful. You're going to make 6-7 figures. You're going to do this. And I understand there's a lot of clickbait out there, especially nowadays, right? In this very, very busy, attention grabbing world where we just want to hang on to all these things. But overall, if there's one thing I'll just keep coming back to in this conversation is like, we need to calibrate ourselves internally first and foremost. That is the key. Like, if you want the key to unlock that next level of success, that next level of abundance, that next level of prosperity, that next level of joy, whatever it is, it's the key is within you, because our consciousness is constantly projecting and dictating our external reality. And if you find yourself stuck in any way, in what ways, in what lens are you viewing this situation? What is your perspective? Are you viewing it from the lower self or the false self? Or are you viewing it from the higher self? And as you begin to alchemize, transform, transmute your own inner world, your own inner beliefs, your own energy, all of that, that is what lends to that catalyst, to that expansion, to that leap in whatever area of your life we're talking about, in this case, business, right? So it really just comes back to that internal game. That's really what, if I were to share, and what I do share with all entrepreneurs and all people I work with, is that we are here to master the inner game. And from there, we can then create the strategies. We can then go and do all of the things we need to do to optimize our business. But we got to start on the internal plane first.
I love that. We are here to master the inner game, and then you earn the right to implement the strategies and tactics to achieve the results. Like, that is such a profound way to put it. And it's even like, you know me, we've talked enough. Like, I live my life by fortune cookies. And one of the quotes that I wrote down for myself was, perspective is the difference between our prison and our power.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's just choosing how we see that situation at such a high level that unlocks that next level. And then I even saw a Brianna West quote this morning, and this is about like the constriction before expansion. It said, one day the mountain that is in front of you will be so far behind you, it will barely be visible in the distance. But the person you become in learning to get over it, that will stay with you forever. And that is the point of the mountain.
Boom. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like even your and my approach, like I have this approach of faith and personal development. And then you have like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey mixed into it. And then you have elevation of consciousness. Like even in the hero's journey, it's not when you slay the dragon, it's when you return to the village to teach the lesson. And then the new dragon appears, right? And it's like this false finish line trap that we fall into over and over and over again. And even for me, and I know you've experienced this as well, like there's so many parts of me so many times where I'm like, oh my God, like there's just a part of me that's like, oh, I've made it, I want to coast. And now when I feel that, I literally run at the wall as fast as possible, because I'm like, that is not the place to be, because it's really just stagnation at like the deepest level. And so we've talked a lot about like breath, and the deeper you breathe, the more you receive, and like you have access to like all these tools. And I feel like even in the lens of that finish line theory and thought process that myself have fallen into, I think all of us have fallen into it. I feel like I would love to know from you, as somebody who is an entrepreneur, like a successful entrepreneur and coaches entrepreneur. Like I've seen this numerous times, and even happened to me in the beginning, where I'm like, oh my God, I have found this breathwork app, right? I love it. And I'll use it for 2 weeks, then I'll stop using it. And it's something I only go back to when something gets hard, or when I'm like, oh, I'm like overwhelmed, right? And I missed that whole proactive side of like embodiment and choosing that. But like when you think about yourself as an entrepreneur, and even the entrepreneurs that you coach, like what are some of the non-negotiables that you like genuinely hold yourself to every day, that allow you to constantly change that projection of your unconscious mind that you're seeing in the world, like things that you protect or that you practice or that you always guide people into, to take a proactive approach to this, for lack of better terms?
Yeah, great question, man. Well, there's a few things, right? Like non-negotiables for me, it's like, well, of course, breath. I breathe every day. I pause every day. A great practice that I've implemented over the years, which is something very simple, which I'll just share here because I love simplicity. I love of practical solutions. So I'm a big proponent of the Gene Keys, and in the Gene Keys, they talk about the power of pause. And pause is just taking 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes throughout your day, 3, 4 times a day, to just pause. You may set an alarm on your phone. That alarm goes off. You sit, you stare at the wall, you stare outside, you just be with yourself and you breathe. That in itself is actually a habit, a micro habit that actually lends to rewiring your nervous system to a place of presence and calm over time. And that is the true currency. In a world that's busy, in a world that's chaotic, in a world that's noisy, calm and relaxation presence is the key to clarity, to creativity, to intuition, to all the things that we desire. So that is number one. I implement that throughout my day. Number two, some form of movement, some form of moving my body, whether that's a walk, whether that's a HIIT workout, whether that's, weights, whatever it is, stretching, it doesn't matter. Movement is key. And the really other massive component for me is sunlight, is grounding, is putting my feet in the earth. Like just like these simple things that we often forget to do, right? And we can go into nutrition and eating well and all these things, like great, and sleep and optimizing that. Those three things every day it's a non-negotiable for me, and something that I need to execute in order for me to actually feel good in myself. And I used to work 19 hours. I used to work 14 hours, these crazy long days where I would just like completely just go at it. And I thought that was the approach, right? Because we were taught like, oh, that hustle and grind culture. And it's like, yeah, like there's definitely some work to be put in to achieve our dreams, our intentions, our goals, and so forth. I love that. I love a discipline and commitment to that. But we don't need to burn ourselves out in the fucking process. I've done that to myself so many times over and over again until I had to learn. So I got sick and I just got completely overwhelmed. And now it's like, no, the true value is the rest. It's the recovery. It's the presence. It's the relaxation. Because from there, like you were sharing earlier, just doing that on the plane, and then you had that one burst hour, 2 hours of productivity better than you've ever had. So it's like slowing down before going fast.
Mm-hmm. And I'll even give context to this. Like I flew to Dubrovnik, Croatia for a wedding for like my best friends Jake and Kat, who are also clients of mine. And I was in the wedding, and I was like, okay, cool. I brought my podcast gear. I brought everything because I'm like, oh, it's wedding time, right? Like there's not going to be a lot of things I'm involved in. I'll get some work done. And then I ended up being with them from like 7 a.m. until 2 a.m. every day, pre-wedding prep, post-wedding, the day after the wedding. I was kayaking with their family. And I was internalizing a lot of guilt and shame and fear and scarcity of like, oh, I'm not working, I'm not working, I'm not working, right? And then the stories just kept continuing. But then in those moments, I was out kayaking. I'm like, there's no place I'd rather be. Like, this is amazing. I'm making memories with people I love. I'm filling my body. I'm in the sunlight of like the Mediterranean or whatever, wherever I was, whatever sea that is in Croatia. I don't even know. And I'm out there, but there was like this duality of this dance, right? It was like the good guy and the bad guy on my shoulders, right? Like my body was like, oh, this feels so good. But then all that quote unquote little self or lower self was like, yeah, but you should be, and shaming myself and like, you're not making progress, and boom. And like, that's a lot of what was coming up. And then I'm away from my son, right? And I'm away from the people I love. And I'm like, oh, you're so selfish. You're so blank. And yet I'm loving people that I love with my life that are my family, and I'm there present and in their wedding. And it was like this constant back and forth. And so, I'm with them. And then by the time I get in the car and I get to the airport, it was like the first time I'd had space. And then in that space, I was finding myself like, oh, what movie am I going to watch? Like, what am I going to do? And like, I couldn't work. I couldn't bring myself to open my laptop. And it was like this little version of George, like running away from my feelings. And then I was like, okay. And I was like, let's lock into this. And that's like why it came up. And I want to acknowledge this for everybody too, because I've had drastic success in my life, and I've had drastic quote unquote failures, and I've had ups and downs. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that it's not something that ever goes away. Like, our unconscious mind is picking up millions of bits of information a day that are being filtered into what we consciously think about. And those stories, they come, we either catch them or we're taught them, but it's this constant awareness and evolution to them, like Christopher, like you were talking about, that like in those moments, pause and like take a moment to pause and breathe and like feel the feelings and make adjustments. And even on that vein, like everyone's like, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. I'm like, well, if you study them and like deeply study them, it brings up Keith Cunningham in my mind. And he's a massive successful entrepreneur. And if you read his book, The Road Less Stupid, there's one thing he tells you to do every single day, which is quote unquote thinking time or pause time away from the world, just with you and your feelings and your perspective, to be able to have those feelings and process your emotions and then think of creative ideas that you haven't thought about. And I'm like over here validated because you talked about the pause, and I talk about having an intentional stillness practice every day. And then you talk about hitting those wickets so that you can function. I'm like, hey, did you hit your 4 quadrants today? Like, did you set your mind right with your pause or your meditation? Did you move your body like to get into it? Right. And then did you feed yourself like nutrition, sunlight, or any of those things before you touch your business? Because it also brings up for me, like, talking about that hustle and grind, but hustle and grind is not everywhere. It's intentionally put into a bucket to achieve a goal or an outcome. And none of us think that if we go run 50 miles a day every single day that our body's going to get stronger. Or none of us go to the gym and lift for 9 straight hours. We understand the power of that pause and the rest. And in my opinion, entrepreneurship is like one of the hardest professional sports, but we also have to treat ourselves like we're professional athletes, because it's a game that's pretty unpredictable, and there's not one playbook. Like, it changes, the rules of the game change, and you got to be training appropriately for it. And so I absolutely love that perspective. And so can you do me a favor though, because like I'm actually really excited about it and I keep forgetting, but like, can you give everybody like an overview of your ecosystem just now that we're in this? Like, you have Beats and
Yep.
Breath, you have the book coming out, or is it out
It's coming
already?
out. It'll be out by the end of 2024.
It's coming out. Yeah. Can you tell everybody about that now? Just because I feel like it'll lend so much
Yeah.
credence.
So I am in the process of finishing and putting the final touches on my book, which is called Master Your Breath, Transform Your Life, a guide to personal and spiritual freedom. And the idea behind this book is to really create a new lens in which we look at breath, right? And the way in which I detail through this book is it's a mix of spirit, science, story, and practical application. So someone that comes to the book, that reads the book and goes through it, there is a way in which the book is constructed and created so that it takes people through this engaging narrative around the power and potential of your breath, which is something that we don't often think of. It's the greatest tool we have because without it, we would not live. And beyond that, it is a key, it's a pathway, a gateway to a greater, a greater self. it's a greater business, a greater relationship, whatever it is you want to put on it. The breath is the foundation of it all. And that's the way in which I live my life, and have lived my life since I almost lost my life, almost 10 years ago, in a near drowning incident. And so from that point, it's like, when we can not take our breaths for granted, and we can look at it as a tool, as a catalyst, as a key, as an instrument, as a, conductor to really move into a greater, more authentic expression of ourselves, greater creativity, productivity, intuition, mood, joy, clarity, keep spouting them off. It really is life changing in so many ways. And that's what I want to convey. And I hope I conveyed in this book. And so that's going to be coming out at the end of this year. And all of that is connected to my ecosystem of Beats and Breath, which is my Breathwork app. And we've created a practice, a technology called Sonic Breathwork, which blends breath and sound music together in a very powerful, transformative way to create deep healing and expansion within people. And we have all different themes and intentions and all of that. So I'm very excited about that. And, for me, it's like, I know that, if I were to simplify, I actually had a really interesting past life regression, spontaneous past life regression experience a couple of weeks ago. And if I, maybe I'll get into that in just a moment, but long story short, the message that was given to me, and which I hold so sacred and which I've forgotten at times, is that my sole mission is to help breathe life back into people and breathe life back into this planet. And that's like, at the end of the day, that's the foundation of it all. And like, if I'm doing that, I'm in service to the whole.
I love that. And I just gotta say, because Chris and I are friends, and I love the app. And Chris even came into the Alliance and did a breathwork session for us. And it was absolutely amazing. Like, I genuinely love it. And even at our events now, I'm like, I'm not facilitating breathwork anymore. Close your eyes and listen to Chris. I have the app. I'm just going to plug it into the speaker and I'm going to ride the ride with you. But it's great. And he also has like different reasons, different modalities. You can do short, you can do long, you can do your sympathetic nervous system, your parasympathetic, right? Like to elevate, right? To bring clarity, but also like just to rest in and like breathe in. And the music alone, it's amazing. Like the feelings, the experience, it's like an 8D experience for me. And I'm a big fan, I'm a big proponent. And so we'll have all of that linked in the show notes too. And I just felt called to put it in the middle of the show because I'm like, no, we just need to talk about it now, because I can say that even, just to put myself on blast, like one of the things that I notice about myself is that even with like my weight loss journey and being there, or my practices or the structure of my day, breath is one of the first things that I throw out, even though I know how important it is. And I have to consistently remind myself like to come to my breath and to come to my breathing and just bring myself back there. And it's such a powerful practice because it's really a connection to self, and whatever that is, like there's nothing wrong. And you even hit this earlier, where our journey in this life, our emotions, they're modulating and they're fleeting, right? And breath is the easiest way through all of it, right? It's like breath and cold for me. They're the ones that kind of bring me right back, right? Because it's kind of hard to be in my head when I'm having to breathe to not freeze my butt off when I'm in cold water. But breath is also something that I can do when I'm driving, or when I'm off this podcast, or when I'm in a meeting, or when my emotions get heightened, or when I'm having a disagreement with somebody. It's this tool that's just constantly there to adjust my own thermometer and also bring awareness to my barometer, because it lets me check in with myself and see where I am and where I'm not breathing. And, it's funny too, because like I go to the doctor, I go to the dentist, and they always take my blood pressure. And the first thing I do before they take my blood pressure is, because I want to have like the lowest heart rate and best blood pressure, is I start breathing for like 3 minutes. And I'm like, I'm going to win this game. I'm going to show you, right? I'm going to show you. But yet in my life, it's like one of the first things I forget to do when it gets so loud or gets so noisy. And so I also love earlier when you talked about like the power of pause, just being intentional in your day, and like being intentional when you wake up, of like starting your day on the right tone. Like Chris and I share this in common, because he lives down on the beach in Mexico and is surrounded by nature and healing. And I'm in the mountains of Montana. But like genuinely my favorite thing every morning the first thing I do when I wake up, like I'm out of bed and I am outside barefoot watching the sun come up over the mountain, just on the grass, no matter how cold it is, or on the snow, just taking a couple breaths. And in the winter, it's a little shorter at the beginning of the season, right? Maybe like 30 seconds. And then I like build up my tolerance to do cold therapy on my feet only. But it's something that we have access to. And it really, really is a powerful, powerful tool. And I've realized for myself that when I get worked up, when I get emotional, when I'm in those like ugly tears and crying tears, the first thing that goes is my breath. And it's these short, constricted breaths. And quite frankly, I'm like, I know the moment I breathe, it's going to like release the emotion and go away. And there's a part of me that fights. I'm like, no, I just want to be in my lower self right now. And, you know, like really using it as a tool is really, really powerful. And I think it's just something that like we all get to remind ourselves of, like, just breathe, use it, access it. And it doesn't have to be this intense process. It's not that you have to sit down once a week and do this massive holotropic breathing session or this massive transformational breath. It's something to bring into your everyday to day, like you drink water, right? Like even anchor it into that habit. Like, you know what, every time I find myself drinking my water for the day, I'm just going to stop and breathe for a minute. I'm going to taste this water. I'm going to experience this water. I'm going to pause in this moment. And I think it's just such a profound reminder to constantly stay in that practice. So I love that. And I'm just curious too, because the book sounds absolutely incredible. And I know the breath is a big component of it. What are some of like the other components or big like pillars in the book to achieving the things that you're helping people with?
Yeah. So the way I've broken the book down and kind of what I received as a quote unquote download during the process was, you know, let's look at all these various pillars of our life, right? And obviously the book in itself is founded on the breath. And so the breath is woven into these pillars, but I also share stories personally, as well as clients, you know, things that people have gone through. And as it pertains to healing trauma, letting go of our past, discovering our higher purpose, expanding our consciousness, and manifesting the life of our dreams. And I know that is also sort of buzzword, right? Manifestation, but I break it down to not only the spirit of it, but the science of it, right? And what's actually transpiring here vibrationally, because as we talked about earlier, our consciousness is dictating the way in which we experience reality, right? It's mastering that inner game. And so when we do that and we understand how to do that, we are raising our vibrational energy to match that of our dreams, of our goals, of our desires, of our intentions, and so forth. And so I take people through this very in depth. I have exercises, processes that I've used not only for myself, but all of my clients. Like I'm basically throwing a ton of value into this book. And the reason I'm doing that is because, number one, I'm a big believer in giving a lot of value up front, because it's like, what am I here to hide? You go and use this and do this. And if it works, great. And if you want to take it deeper, you know where to find me. But here's practical application you can use right now to apply to your life. And so these are the sort of core pillars I talk about. Beyond that, we get into the origins, the roots, as well as the evolution of breath work, the mind body breath connection, the science, as well as then wrapping everything up into how to live a breath centered life, is what I call it. Living a breath centered life. What does that actually mean? How do you apply that? How do you do that? And from that place, all of your life, your relationships, your health, your business, your family, your creativity, your vocation, your purpose, everything expands as a result of living this breath-centered life. And so I feel it's extremely comprehensive, and I'm really pleased and happy to be a conduit and a channel for this wisdom to come forth. Like, I don't claim ownership of it. Breath has been around since the beginning of time. And, ancient societies and cultures have spoken about it, talked about it. And now I'm just sort of bringing that all together in a simple way, practical way, where people can really use this to amplify their life.
Oh, I love that. And I'm gonna try to frame this question, because speaking of practical, I think this is so beautiful. And I don't know how to say this without saying this, but like, I love you to pieces. But I feel like if some people listen, they'd be like, this guy's like woo woo and lives on a mountain. Like there's no way. But no, you as an entrepreneur, like, have launched one of like the hardest products to launch, which is like an app, right? And have created investment and have walked and navigated the lens of entrepreneurship. In my opinion, as somebody who's had an app and launched an app, like one of the hardest buckets in one of the most competitive spaces to like get to this level of success and coaching and all these things. And so like you're an incredible entrepreneur. And so like practically, like I would love to know, like in that same vein of the practicality of the breath and living a breath-centered life, like what are like maybe like the top 3 things that you've learned or been able to apply, or you have used breath or any of the tools that you talk about to like really achieve this level of success as an entrepreneur, like in the day to day? Because like you literally live and breathe entrepreneurship, but you also live a breath centered life. And I see you create music, facilitate breathwork experiences, coach clients. You're running an app. You have investors that you're managing. You're raising more money. You're building this app. You're constantly making new features and developing the app. Like you are like entrepreneurial through to through. And I think it's like such a beautiful bridge between the two of them, because you live it, but you also teach it, and then you use it in your lens of entrepreneurship to be able to achieve it. So like what are like some of the practical things or the things that you've learned or lessons or things that people could take away practically on like kind of how to integrate all of it into entrepreneurship? I would just kind of love to hear your
Yeah,
thoughts.
I think there's so much here that comes through, and it's like almost I feel this urge within me right now to share, like, instead of just talking about it, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just do why don't
Okay,
we
I'm
just
in.
do like a short, like 3 to 5 minute meditative practice that I don't know what's going
Let's
to
do
come
it.
through, but I just feel called. That's like, let's just do it.
Let's do it, because we got like 10-15 minutes
All right,
left. So let's do
perfect.
it.
I mean, obviously, it won't be beats and breath style because I don't have the music queued up right now, but we can just do a silent breath centered meditation. How does that sound? All
I'm
right.
in, man.
So, just inviting, obviously, if you're driving, you don't want to do this, but pull over, or if you're at your house, office, wherever you are, just shut down your eyes, close down your eyes for a moment, and just come into center with us, with George and I together. Before we go into this meditation, I just want you to feel your feet planted into the ground beneath you. Feeling that anchor of the earth, the support, the connection to that earth beneath your feet. And just notice your spine, notice how you're sitting. Are you hunched over? Are you leaned back? Are you sitting straight up? And just getting comfortable, allowing yourself to straighten up and to really just feel into your body for a moment. And together we're going to go into a short breath practice, a rhythmic breath practice, breathing in through our nose, breathing out of our mouth. You just exhale out all of the air out of your mouth, any remaining air that you have. And we'll breathe in through the nose. And gently letting go, exhaling out of the mouth. Again, breathing in through the nose. And full release, letting go. Again, deep, steady inhale. And gentle, slow exhale. And on this next breath, breathing in, really expanding the belly. And dropping all the way down to the floor. Just continue that circulation, breathing in and breathing out. And as you follow that rhythm, as you follow my voice and my guidance, just allowing yourself to let go of any tense, tight, constricted energy in your body, in your physical vessel. Allowing all of that remaining stress, anxiety, overwhelm, just to be fully surrendered and released down through your feet. And as you tune deeper into that rhythmic flow, feeling your belly, your navel expand, carrying that energy all the way up to the crown of your head and all the way back down. Feeling that flow, feeling that rhythm. And in the same process, tuning into the sensations within your body. Noticing any feelings, any sensations arising from within you. As you continue to stay connected to this breath. And if any thoughts arise, just allowing them to pass by with each inhale and each exhale. Breathing in that deeper level of peace, calm, clarity. We'll take a few more deep breaths. One more breathing in and letting go. And just returning to your natural rhythm and to your natural breath. And just sitting there for a moment in stillness, in the gap, in the pause. Just observing, just noticing what's alive and what's present right now for you. And in a few moments, we're going to gently come back into this space. We're going to open our eyes and just stay there for a moment and just notice looking around, feeling into your external environment. Just inviting everybody to come back. Just notice where you were to where you are now after just a few minutes of breathing. That's the difference. That's the game changer.
That is the best answer to a question I've ever asked. ever. You're like, no, we're just going to do it. And we're going to do it right now. And my heart rate dropped like 15 beats a minute from
Mm,
before till now. And so thank you for the reminder. Thank you for that example. Thank you for leading us through that. Like that was incredible and such a profound, quite frankly, pattern interrupt in a day that we can do at any moment and pause in that gap and for 5 minutes or 3 minutes and just bring that presence and those feelings. Like I even hear the tone of my voice and my cadence so different right now because I was all amped up in like podcast George mode and now I'm in like Goose Fraba mode over here and it feels absolutely
mm,
incredible. And for those listening, I'd also save this episode and at any moment you need this, just come back to this spot and pause and use this in your day. And if you take Chris's advice and you set that alarm in your phone 3 to 4 times a day, right? We've talked about setting alarms in your phone before of like, hey, is what I'm currently doing aligned with my vision? And I've had you do that before. Well, habit stack it. Ask yourself that question of what am I currently doing aligned with my vision? And then pause for 5 minutes and be still or be in breath and do a round of this rhythmic breathing and see if your answers change or see if your clarity changes or if your body feels different or when you feel those moments of constraint or that constriction that you might be feeling or the things that we call resistance of like overwhelm or fear or scarcity or whatever story is showing up. Just use this as a reference guide. It's like a get out of jail free card, an SOS to come back to this because I've learned personally that I still do better as somebody who facilitates breath by being guided through it because I just get to surrender into it and I get to be led through that process and it's a lot more supportive. And so I'm also going to say, and Chris, I want you to give the website in a minute, but download the Beats and Breath app for sure. Like he has, and I know because we've had calls, he has incredible resources on there in the version for you to try, for you to experience, for you to be in and go into that practice. But make breath a part of your day. Like use this as a tool that is there at your access and at your disposal. And it is one that we can genuinely access in every moment, like on an airplane, locked in the middle of a meeting. You can run out of a conference room and go pee and take a prolonged pee, or go hide in a stall, sit on the toilet and just do breath. Like, I don't care where you do it. I just want you to do it. And you can be like us. And I know Chris does this too. You'll be in the middle of a restaurant. You'll just close your eyes and go into your own world and just breathe. And it's okay to do it. And it's there for your disposal. And so is the website
yeah.
beatsandbreath.com?
So beatsandbreath.com is the website. On there is the iOS and Android app that people can click on and download. And then for personal, my personal brand and coaching, all of that, Gene Key stuff, ChristopherAugust.co. So those are the two websites. Everything's there.
Yeah, and we'll have everything linked in the show notes, including Chris's Instagram. And Chris, can you just give your Instagram for everybody too, since we're connected there and I don't remember your handle?
Oh, little
Oh, did you hear me?
froze, little freeze.
Oh yeah, we froze for a second. Can you give everybody your
Yeah.
Instagram too?
Yeah. So Instagram is Christopher_August. And then our Beats and Breath one is just Beats and Breath. So, yep, everything's there.
Yeah. And I would say this to everybody. I recommend this because at our last event and every time I go somewhere and breath comes up, I'm like Chris's biggest advocate because I love the app. And so go to the website and like get in the app and try some of the demo tracks and like listen to it and experiencing it because there's no words to put to it. It's just a feeling and you get to feel it. And if it feels good to you and it resonates with you, I'd recommend making it a part of your practice. And my invitation for you today is like, obviously Chris is a walking treasure trove of wisdom and embodiment of this. Like tune into his ecosystem, like tune into him, like on Instagram and go surround yourself with this in your environment because you'll also be reminded and it'll have some good anchors to like come back to your breath and come into those pauses and to do any of those things. So whether you had a perspective shift today, there's a tool that you're going to try. My invitation for you is to take it seriously and practice it and like incorporate it into your life, incorporate it into your day and make it a part of like who you are. And if you aren't in the alliance and you end up joining our alliance, which is just mindofgeorge.com/RBAA, you'll also see in the treasure trove in there of resources we have. We have Chris in there who led us all through an incredible breath work with the music, with the experience, and it was magical. I was laying on my office floor like starfished out, just like in pure heaven with my headphones on. And so it's an absolute incredible process, and it's something that you have access to all the time. And so, Chris, I appreciate you, man, like so much. Like, this was a gift. I appreciate your wisdom and your guidance and who you are as a man and just a friend in my life and all of that. And so thank you so much for coming, for sharing, for doing all of that today. And just honored, my friend.
Oh, thank you, brother. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate you and everything that you're doing to elevate this world. And it really means a lot. And I'm just stoked to call you a brother, and very excited for all of the beautiful future endeavors that will inevitably transpire. So thank you so much, brother.
Oh, of course. So for everybody listening, this has been another episode of The Mind of George So, or it belongs in a straitjacket, so I only share the safest parts with you. And I haven't said that in a hot minute, and I felt called to say that with Chris. And so no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you're doing, just like thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself. And thank you in advance for taking this and incorporating any of this into your life, because it makes you the example, it makes you the lighthouse. And it's a tool that helps you have a bigger impact and change the conversation in the world and help people in whatever capacity you are helping people. And so we love you. We appreciate you. You will either see us in the next episode or you'll hear us in your earballs. But either way, we're out.